You won't believe what happened next. And neither did anyone in that first-class cabin. Before we dive in, drop your city in the comments, because this one's going to have you talking. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss more real-life dramas that make your heart pound and your mind spin. Now, buckle in. He stepped through the curtain with the quiet presence of someone who'd learned long ago that you don't have to announce power for it to be felt. Jamal Carter, navy suit, smooth as midnight, cufflinks catching a shy flicker of cabin light, ticket for seat 2A in one hand, and a calm, unreadable half-smile fixed in place. He wasn't just successful, he was the person success calls for advice. Founder of a rising tech firm, young, sharp, and one of the few to turn no into jet fuel. What almost no one knew, he also owned a silent share of the very airline carrying him west that night. He didn't wear that like armor. He wore it like a secret. At the head of the aisle, the lead attendant pinned on her perfect smile for the gentleman in front of Jamal. "Welcome back, Mr. Langley. Your 25-year single malt is chilling, just as you like." Polished, effortless, and then she turned. Her expression cooled like glass, dunked in ice water. "Boarding pass?" Two clipped words. No eye contact, no warmth. He passed it over. A beep, a nod, a pivot away, as if he'd disappeared into the upholstery. He'd felt that temperature drop before, in boardrooms where he had out-earned everyone at the table, in restaurants that welcomed him only after counting who else was watching, in classrooms where teachers praised his answers but never said his name. He had a place in first class. It just always felt like he was borrowing it from an invisible landlord. He slid into 2A and checked the display above the galley. Storm cells in the flight path. A little turbulence in the forecast. He opened his tablet to skim keynote slides for the AI conference he'd headline at dawn. Yet his focus drifted to a storm from years ago. Rain pounding a diner window on the south side, a waitress with a polite voice and a cruel policy. "We don't serve your kind here." His mother's hand squeezing his under the table, her shoulders steady, while her heart cracked behind her eyes. They left with dignity and empty stomachs. The memory still lived in his bones. A soft chime snapped him back. The lead attendant glided down the aisle. For the passenger next to him, Mr. Langley, she set down that glowing tumbler of amber, neat, not a bead of sweat out of place on the crystal. Then she returned to Jamal with a bright orange plastic cup and said, without looking at him, "For you." He blinked. "Excuse me, I pre-ordered the 25-year single malt as well." She tilted her head. "Out of stock," she said, like a lock slamming shut. Then she was gone. The young attendant working the other side, Ethan, hesitated near Jamal's row, apology already leaking into his voice. "Sir, your single malt actually is available. She's handling the orders tonight." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jamal's jaw settled. He kept his voice level. "Thank you." No scene. No flair. He lifted his phone and sent a message to his assistant waiting in Los Angeles. "Log this. Watch for patterns." Seconds later, the reply flashed back like a lightning strike. On it, 28 minority complaints in 18 months in this cabin. 9 named the same lead attendant. The seatbelt sign dinged on, engines rolled deeper. The cabin stilled into a hush that always feels like the moment before rain. Meals began to arrive. Art on white plateware. For Mr. Langley, marbled steak and truffle clouds. Across the aisle, lobster pillows dressed in saffron. And for Jamal, a turkey sandwich in crinkled wrap. Green fuzz blooming along the crust like a slow insult. The smell hit before the sight. He breathed in, slow and even. Is there a mistake? She smiled without softness. That's what we have left. Then a whisper, pitched too low for anyone but him to hear. Or so she thought. People like him don't belong up here anyway. He didn't rise. He didn't break. He reached under the armrest and tapped the small flush button that only a handful of executives knew existed. 4 months earlier, he'd helped pilot a discreet customer experience recorder. No faces without consent, no bathrooms, no overreach, just audio and context when complaints crossed a line. A faint vibration told him the system was rolling. The ceiling microphones heard what the human ear politely pretends not to. Mr. Langley glanced sideways at the moldy sandwich and then back to his own plate. His mouth tightened. He didn't speak. Old habits collide with good intentions, and silence wins more often than it should. Jamal's phone buzzed again. 9 incidents with her name. Several misunderstandings. Photos attached to 4. The words sat in his chest like stones. Coffee service began. The cabin jolted. Her elbow slipped. Hot drops spattered his cuff. "Oh, I am so sorry," she said. Voice sugar, eyes vinegar. He brushed the droplets away. "I'll handle it." A tiny light blinked on his watch as the recorder tagged the spill and the look on her face. Data has no bias. It just keeps receipts. Near the window, a young black woman watched and froze at the same time, thumb hovering over the record button and never pressing down. Across the galley curtain, the lead attendant hissed to Ethan, "Keep an eye on him. Always the same type. Always looking to get something for free." She didn't know that the crew wearables rolled in the same secure direction as the cabin mics. Every sneer had already stamped the time. Jamal opened an encrypted portal on his phone and accessed internal files, his co-owner credentials unlocked. He didn't abuse that key, but tonight he needed the truth to be bigger than his memory. Complaints, dismissals, patterns wrapped in passive language. He forwarded the lot with a short note. Full escalation, board distribution. Then he did the most strategic thing he could do. He waited. When she returned, her tone had shifted from quiet cruelty to careful stagecraft. "Sir, please lower your voice and stop disrupting the cabin." He blinked up at her. "I haven't said a word." She turned slightly, so nearby, passengers could hear. "I understand this can be stressful for some people, but we must maintain order." The script was familiar. Seed doubt, claim disturbance, pre-authorize indignation. Mr. Langley frowned. Across the aisle, a consultant closed her laptop and watched. Jamal leaned in just enough that only she could hear. "Everything you're doing is being recorded." For the first time all evening, something wobbled behind her eyes. "You can record all you want," she said, knuckles whitening around the tray. The intercom chimed. The captain's voice carried the firm weight that pilots learn early. "We're aware of a situation in first class. Remain calm and follow crew instructions." Jamal looked at the speaker, not out of fear, but out of recognition. He'd been framed as a problem before he ever raised a hand. He messaged his assistant. "If flight deck escalates, loop legal." Confirmed came back like a metronome. HR watching the stream. Board chair notified. Evidence locked. "Multiple complaints," the lead attendant announced more loudly, performing for the aisle. "If this continues, the captain will intervene." Mr. Langley straightened, voice steady and clear. "That's not true. I've been here the whole time. He hasn't been disruptive. You are." Color climbed into her cheeks. "Sir, please remain seated." He did not. "I served 30 years. I know fairness when I see it." And this isn't it. The hush that followed made noise of its own. She ducked into the galley and called the cockpit. "Disruptive passenger in 2A, she said. "Recommend we divert if it escalates." Jamal heard the faint edge of panic she didn't intend to share. Ethan crouched beside 2A a minute later. "She's trying to override the system." Jamal's eyes narrowed. "She doesn't have clearance." A soft vibration on his wrist confirmed it. Unauthorized attempt flagged. Senior compliance alerted. "Good," he whispered. "Let her try." Phones lifted like periscopes. First one, then three, then a constellation. The captain came back on, voice grave now. "Due to an escalating passenger situation, we'll divert to Phoenix for security assistance." Gasps moved through the cabin, like wind through grass. Jamal didn't so much as shift in his seat. He tapped one command. False escalation logged. "Prepare ground team." Reply, "On site when you land. Do not engage." And then the lead attendant crossed a line you don't come back from. She pressed the call button, softened her tone, and murmured to the cockpit, "I have reason to believe the passenger in 2A may be armed." Ethan's head snapped around. "That's not—" She cut him off with a look. The captain, already primed to believe the worst, didn't ask for proof. "Remain seated," he announced, tension threading his words. "Security will meet us on arrival." A little boy 2 rows up whispered, "Mummy, is the bad man going to hurt us?" Jamal swallowed the shard, that question lodged in his throat, and turned to the child with a gentle smile. "No one is going to hurt you," he said softly. That single kindness pulled the cabin a half-inch back from panic. Descent began through a scrim of lightning. The aircraft dropped and steadied, dropped and steadied. The city's lights spread, like a carpet welcoming or warning depending on your night. As wheels hammered the runway and reverse thrust roared, the cabin fell into that peculiar silence people keep for outcomes they can't predict. The captain opened the cockpit door and stepped into view with the posture of a man expecting the show to go his way. "Please remain seated while security boards," he announced. Phones rose higher. The forward door clicked. 4 figures stepped in. 2 in navy jackets with gold insignia, airport security, and a woman in a tailored suit whose expression mixed empathy with steel. The head of people operations. Behind them stood 2 executives you only see when companies intend to mean business. The lead attendant pointed with confidence, sharpened to a blade. "That's him. Aggressive, non-compliant. I recommend immediate removal." The woman in the suit didn't even glance at 2A. She lifted a hand. "Miss Davis, step forward." Confusion flashed across the lead attendant's face, like static. What?" "You, Mr. Walsh, and the captain will join us on the jet bridge for questioning regarding misconduct." A ripple moved through the cabin. Shock, then relief, then the first fizz of vindication. The captain bristled. "I acted on my crew's report," he protested. The suit's gaze didn't waver. "You diverted without verification, filed an unfounded security concern, and failed to investigate in-cabin complaints. You will answer for those decisions." The lead attendant tried one last pivot. "You can't do this without my union rep." "We'll follow proper process," the woman replied evenly. "Effective immediately. You are relieved of duty." And then the air changed. Jamal stood. No flourish, no speech, just enough to be heard without raising his voice. "There's something you should know," he said. "My name is Jamal Carter. I run a tech company, and I'm also a silent co-owner of this airline. 15%. He didn't gloat. He just handed the truth to the room and let it decide what to do with it. A hush fell so complete, the ventilation sounded like ocean surf. Phones trembled in people's hands. Mr. Langley's eyebrows climbed and stayed up there. The lead attendant took a half step back. "You own enough to ensure what happened here doesn't happen again," he said gently, without heat. "To me, to any of you, to anyone who has ever been told they don't belong in the seat they paid for." Applause began like a shy ripple, then rolled into something that felt a lot like release. The woman in the suit turned to the cabin. "On behalf of the airline, we apologize for what you witnessed and what some of you endured. A new crew is briefing now. Every passenger on board will receive compensation and elevated status. We will also be conducting a thorough review of past unresolved complaints." It wasn't about money, though the room couldn't help but react when numbers were mentioned. It was about being seen. Jamal's voice carried again, softer now. "Compensation fixes inconvenience. Policy fixes harm. Starting tonight, every pending case gets reopened. We'll implement real-time audit triggers, mandatory bias training, and a passenger advocacy line staffed around the clock by a team that doesn't report into the cabin hierarchy." She nodded, tapping notes into her tablet, and you could feel the story shift from spectacle to structure. A young woman in row 5 stood with her phone clenched and courage rising. "Thank you," she said, voice wavering. "I've had moments like this. I always stayed quiet. Tonight, I don't feel invisible." Jamal met her eyes. "You never were," he said. "Some people just pretend better than others." Mr. Langley cleared his throat. "I should have spoken sooner," he said, not apologizing to the room so much as promising himself out loud. "When we stay quiet, the wrong people think they're right." He and Jamal shook hands. Phones captured it, not because two men touching palms is the news, but because some handshakes reset the temperature in the room. A new captain arrived, posture calm and voice warm, assuring everyone the rest of the journey would be handled with dignity and care. The shift was immediate, shoulders unhitched. The hum returned to a human pitch. People compared stories and snacks and the best shows to binge on red-eye flights. Strangers became allies because adversity had introduced them properly. By wheels up again, the outside storm had moved on. Inside, the weather was different too. Jamal leaned back. His watch buzzed as the world's attention tugged at the edges of the story, but he wasn't thinking about streams and counts. He was thinking about his mother's hands around a paper menu in a diner that chose not to see her. He was thinking about how he had promised himself, at 11, that when he found a seat at the table, he would leave the door open behind him. Tonight, in a pressurized tube, 30,000 feet above a country still learning itself, he kept that promise. 9 months later, people still brought up Flight 512 like it was a holiday, like they remembered where they were when they watched fairness knock on a cockpit door and ask for a word. What started as humiliation for one man became a case study for an entire industry. Policies weren't just rewritten, they were enforced. Complaints didn't just get logged, they were investigated by teams without a stake in looking away. Incidents didn't just drop, they plummeted. The company didn't just survive, it grew, because respect is good business, and trust buys loyalty no advertisement can. But that was the big picture. The personal picture looked like a sunlit office, high above a city that had raised him tough and tender. A frame on the desk, his mother in her work shirt, smiling through the kind of tired you can taste. He touched the glass once and then straightened his tie. A ceremony waited at headquarters. a quiet unveiling for the passengers whose voices had become a chorus. There was a plaque for them now, not to immortalize a mess, but to mark what community can do when one person refuses to be baited into breaking. Mr. Langley flew in, handshakes firm, jokes dry. "You turned turbulence into transformation," he said, with a grin that reached the corners of his eyes. "Not bad for a Tuesday." Jamal laughed, not because the line was clever, but because relief can sound like humor after a storm. Then Sophia, the woman in the suit with the steady eyes from that night, approached, her voice low. "Someone asked to see you," she said. "Your call." He turned. The lead attendant stood near the entrance, stripped of armor, hair pulled back, no performance left. Time had softened the sharp edges on her face into something human. She held an envelope like it weighed more than paper should. "I don't expect you to want this," she began, words careful. "But I've been replaying that night for months. I was wrong. Not just about you. About what power means when you're the one with the tray and the rules and the advantage. I'm sorry. No excuses. No whataboutism. Just the small, heavy truth." "Do you know why I didn't lash out?" he asked, genuinely curious, not fishing. She shook her head. "Because anger changes moments," he said. "Patience changes systems." She closed her eyes for a second, like that line hurt in an earned way. She held out the envelope. "It's a letter, for when you want to read it." He took it and slipped it into his jacket. "I can't rewrite what happened," he said, soft but firm. "But you can decide who you are next." She nodded, not absolved, not condemned, just accountable. She left with her shoulders a little lower and her pace a little slower, the way people walk when they've started doing the work. Outside, microphones waited like open mouths. He didn't head toward them. The story would be told in policies and audits and the steady evaporation of complaints that once seemed as common as salt on airplane peanuts. He and Mr. Langley stepped into the late afternoon light. "You ever going to fly this airline again?" the older man asked, teasing but sincere. Jamal smiled. "Yes," he said, "because now it's safe for everyone." And that's the story. Not of a meltdown at 30,000 feet, but of a moment that could have turned ugly and instead turned useful. Of a man who refused to perform the anger expected of him and chose the strategy that built something bigger. Of a cabin full of people who learned that silence is a side and it's never the right one. If this hit you in the gut, if it made you feel seen, if it made you rethink what you'll do the next time you witness a line being crossed, tap that like button so this message reaches more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story that reminds us who we can be when it matters. And hey, drop your city in the comments. I'm curious where you were when you heard how Flight 512 changed everything.